So,
Yeah.
so it's easy to say you went from being an employee to a business owner because that sounds like the transition was simple because it's a quick sentence. But the journey is not that easy, is it?
No, no. There was a lot of research involved. And really, like, so my journey goes back even further than the pandemic, because I knew something was wrong with my life a few years before that, but it hadn't really like hit that crisis point yet, I guess. I felt like on paper, I had this job with coworkers that I loved and a company that a school that I really believed in, doing the work that I got my degree in. And so I felt like everything should be right. But we had started going on vacation to New Mexico. And we went on this one vacation one year that was so great. And when I came back from that vacation, the next morning, I felt horrible. Like I was like almost the angriest that I had ever been because this vacation was over. And I was like, this is so dumb. Like, why am I so upset that my vacation's over? And I was like so angry that when I went into work that day, like I almost couldn't speak to anybody because I was just like, I'm going to bite somebody's head off. And so that was like, I think 2017 or 2018. And at that point I started to realize, okay, something is wrong. I need something. So my first solution was, let's have a vacation home in New Mexico. Like I thought that, doing something extravagant like that with my life would make up for feeling so ill at ease with other parts of my life, right? So we bought this piece of land, which we were going to put a tiny house on just in time for us to decide to have a baby, and then just in time to get into the pandemic. So we have the land, the house hasn't happened yet, but this was what started my journey, right? Like it started with this imagining of this house that we were going to have in New Mexico. And so then once the pandemic hit, I had really been thinking about like, I feel like this vacation home plan was like my attempt to band-aid something that's actually a huge crack in the foundation of my life. And I was like, I want to freelance, but people always say like, oh, well, freelance writing, like starving artist, you can't really make good money off of that. So when the pandemic hit, I was like, I have to do something. Like I have no New Mexico now. I have no like trips out with friends. I have no nothing except this job that I'm coming to understand is like sucking me dry. So I had to do a lot of research. I turned to resources from freelancers I knew, who I didn't know personally, but like, I had read articles by them or read their books or whatever. And I knew that they were successful and I didn't know how. So I did a lot of reading, and through that reading, I eventually got to a resource that really was like the cream of the crop in terms of teaching you how to make freelance writing sustainable and pay well. And it wasn't, it was a book, but it wasn't one of those like, take this course for $100 a week and learn how to, it was like somebody who was doing it herself, who had written a book, and the book just, kind of gave you everything. But I had to go through a lot of research steps to get there. And then I had to start implementing it. And so I like worked kind of I think I started looking for clients that April. And I think at the end of May, I started with my first client at the beginning of June. So it was 6 weeks of like just putting these things into practice with like zero results. And then after 6 weeks, I had one client, and that was what I had all summer. And finally, I realized that I was under so much strain from the pandemic and from kind of being at the end of all of these years where I had been working in a way that didn't work for how my brain is wired, that I kind of realized like, I'm going to have to take a leap of faith here because I don't have the wherewithal to start this when I'm constantly being drained by something else.
It's hard. It's a very brave move on your part to let go of the sure thing and grab onto the rope that might not hold you up.
I also want to acknowledge that I'm extremely privileged in that, because I have a partner who had good healthcare through his job. And, you know, if I hadn't have had a partner that had healthcare, I literally couldn't have done it. So, you know, there are a lot of people out there that I think are afraid to figure out how to make it work, or can't figure out how to make it work, you know, because their logistics are more complicated than mine was. But it was still scary, you know, because I mean, we had gotten used to having two incomes. And so even though we were still going to have benefits and we were still going to have a safety net of one person's paycheck, you know, we had a lot of long-term plans for the money that I was making and how our budget was going to work long-term. And I knew from other freelancers that even if you eventually build up to the level of salary that you were making before you went to be freelancing, that can take like up to a year, you know, if you're like really, even if you're really doing everything right. So it was,
and that's scary. A whole budget change. And that's a lot.
Yes. Yes.
And I think people in COVID can understand that too, because for people that were out of work during COVID, unfortunately, and didn't have an appropriate amount of savings or didn't plan for that really...
Well, yeah, because who plans for a pandemic? Like, who plans that your job might just disappear?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you took the jump and you didn't fall on your face.
No, I didn't.
Thank goodness.
Looked for a minute there like I might, but no, I'm still here.
So, but that also brings up another set of pressure too. What were your expectations going into this change? And do you think that they were in line with what they should have been? Because you can have expectations of, oh, it'll be okay. And the struggle of getting it to happen is hard.
Yeah, I think that other freelancers had prepared me for the fact that it was a lot of work. And that was kind of my saving grace, was other people's experience helped set my expectations.
Oh, that's a good point. And then thank goodness you did all that research.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. The research was definitely exactly what I needed. And I stayed plugged in. I mean, I still there's a Facebook group that I'm part of that has other freelancers who are like pretty successful and getting paid pretty well. And I still go to them with questions. I mean, the research is ongoing, and I've been doing this for over a year. Not full-time over a year, but like my first client I've been with for a year. So what was I saying? Yes. So the research was ongoing.
And your expectations is where we're headed.
The expectations were pretty good. I think that I really had a little bit of hope that I would be the unicorn that gets built up faster than 6 months to a year. And honestly, like, I think you have to have a little bit of that sort of blind stupidity to like do that, you know, like you have to like believe that, well, maybe I'll be the unicorn, because it's too scary to think like, oh, it's like I knew that it could take a year, but I wanted to believe that it wouldn't, kind of.
You'd be the magic person that went to sleep, had a nightmare, and wrote a 10 series of books and made it on her first try, right?
Yeah. So there was a little bit of that, but I mean, there has to be, I think, a little bit of that in everybody's venture, because you have to see the dream that you're going towards, you know, and as long as you're not like totally off in la la land and have no idea what could happen to you, it can keep you going to be like, I bet next month I'll find a bunch more clients. I bet next month I'll find a bunch more clients.
Yeah. And it's, there's that comic, which is now a meme because everything's a meme, right? Of the person digging through the mountain and they're just this far from the other side. And that's when they quit.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what comes to mind when you're saying that it'll be better next month. It'll be better next month, and sticking with it. So do you think that there's any other underlying desire that helps you get through those troubling times?
I think honestly, and I don't mean this in a negative way necessarily. I mean, it is just knowing myself. I know that at this point in my life, I can't, it won't work out so well to do anything else. and I don't mean that as like a scary thing, but just like, I know that like I am better now. I'm in a better mental place than I have been. And I know that that's true. And so, and I think the successes that I've had in the past, you know, have made me think, okay, I'm having successes. I know that if I just go back to the 9 to 5, I'm going to be where I was. So, you know, we're not drowning. Like I'm, you know, making some pretty decent money now. And so I think it's just a combination of those things, like just really not wanting to go back to where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some amount of it is dreaming when things are really, truly much more safe and settled. Things are a lot more back to normal now from COVID than they were. But I think dreaming about what it's going to be like when there's no hesitation about travel. You know, when my son is old enough to understand what vacations are, you know, and be more excited, and we want to go places.
And how old is he now?
The times in my wildest dreams that I looked at. He's 2.
He's 2. So
he's
going to be a memory for him.
Oh yeah, it went right over his head. He had no idea. I was crazy crying into my pillow at night. He had no idea anything was happening.
That's good. That's good. So he will be able to determine or learn about vacations and learn about working hard and taking time off and that freedom that comes along with it.
Yeah. And just being able to show him things without having to be like, well, we don't have time to go show him Colorado, or we don't have time to show him New Mexico because, you know, we've both got to get a week off work at the same time and we have to work around, you know, whatever, everything else. You like, there's just so, I think that flexibility of knowing that like we can give my son whatever we want to give him, and we can give ourselves whatever we do too. I mean, like, so this February, I was like nuts after the COVID winter. I mean, like I was like flat out, like I have to leave this state because Southern Illinois is like very cold and gray all winter. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And so we just like, we left my son with my parents and we just went to Florida for like, like 5 days, I think. And just like fled to Florida, and I needed it. It was so needed. I don't know if we could have both gotten the time off at the same time at that time of year and worked it out with bosses and coworkers and stuff. But it was really like, it was truly a mental health break for both of us after being through a winter where we were inside and couldn't go anywhere. So, you know, it's about what we can give our son. It's also about what we can give ourselves.
That's a good point too. Yeah, exactly. Because it's important to fuel yourself for work and also the personal piece too.
Yes, for sure.
So what drew you to New Mexico? That's quite a difference from Illinois.
This is going to sound, everybody laughs when I say this. The very first time that we went to New Mexico, the reason we kept going back is because if you go to New Mexico, you keep going back because it's beautiful and it's eclectic and it's wonderful. But the whole reason that we even went in the first place was because we had watched Breaking Bad, and there were some episodes of Breaking Bad that had really beautiful scenery. And this was before, you know, like before kid or anything. And we could kind of like, when we took vacations, we could go anywhere. And so it was so wide open that we were like, well, we've been to the ocean, you know, we've been to Colorado, like, what do we do next? And we were like, oh, look at this beautiful scenery on Breaking Bad. So we went to New Mexico and we just loved it. And it was like it spoke to both of us. And so we just so we went back the next year. And then pretty soon we got to the point where like we were sad when we would come home. But we didn't want to move there because all of our family and friends are here and our community is super important to us and we couldn't relocate, you know? So, and at that point I was really like sad every time we had to come back. And I wanted to be able to access New Mexico whenever I want so that it won't feel like, oh, there's this beautiful place that is sort of out of reach, like this dream that you get to be treated to once a year or whatever. Like I wanted to be able to get back there when I wanted to. And there's also a little bit of it, like, so my paternal grandmother was really all about the West, and they would have retired out West if it wasn't for all their grandkids being in Illinois. And I feel her out there. She had a big impact on my life. And New Mexico was like one of the places that I thought, like, I knew that she had gone there. She used to vacation there a long time ago. And it just, I don't know, it just really spoke to me for a lot of different reasons.
That's fantastic. And then you're going to be able to share that with your son as well. Yeah, that's great. And so you have plans to, do you think that you'll be able to go a little bit more often now?
Yeah, we're actually hopefully going to go again sometime somewhat soonish, before the end of the year at some point. We're looking into going, and kind of getting back on the horse of figuring out what do we need to do to get the tiny home built. It's some of those things are easier to do when you're actually like there.
Oh, totally.
In person.
Yeah.
So we're
Oh, that's
hoping
exciting.
to get some of that rolling, or at least figure out what the next steps will be.
Yeah, but you're right. It is nice to have that freedom of being able to decide to go someplace for a little while and then come back and go again if you need to, because you have the flexibility in your business and your schedule.
Yeah. And to have a home there, like have the tiny house was such an integral part of it, because we're like, then we always know that we have a place, like that place will always be open to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can make it part of you versus just showing up someplace in a motel room and enjoying it for a little while and then coming back, and you don't have that internal connection so much.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's wonderful. So what does your business, where do you see that's ridiculous interview questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? But where do you, so what's your current, typical client, I guess? Where do you see your business I can't figure out a better way to ask a question.
Yeah. No, that's, and like when you're talking to somebody in a completely different industry, you almost don't know like what questions to ask about how the career trajectory progresses. So I get that. So a lot of my clients right now are universities, which I imagine will probably always be the case just because that's a niche that I'm really, really good at. I work with some small business owners. I did not foresee this, but I have ended up working with a lot of software companies that serve people who are in industries that I have expertise in. So like, I don't have any expertise in software development per se, but it turns out that I'm really good at writing for people when they have to, like, I've made this software and now I want someone to tell my potential clients why this software would help their business. Turns out that I'm really good at writing that type of stuff.
Wow.
So I've been doing that in the mental health sector. Actually, there's a lot of places that make software that helps mental health practitioners run their practice. So I'm hoping to grow my presence in so as far as where I want to see myself in 5 years, I'm hoping to grow myself, continue to grow in the mental health sector. A lot of times for a freelancer, expanding your career is about what niche you want to get into or you dream to get into. I've done a little bit of travel writing before. And so now that COVID is settling down and people are able to safely travel again, in 5 years, I envision travel being a big part of what I write about. And I actually have a very specific vision for that because I want to write about travel within the US. So most travel things are based towards like global travel, which is wonderful. And there are many people for whom that is their thing. But I really want to specialize in writing about travel within the US. So I hope that will be like added to my client repertoire. A lot of freelancers get to the point where they outsource to other freelancers. I'm deciding if that's a goal that I want. Yeah. You'd be surprised. A lot of people that once you get up to a certain level of success, you don't want to turn work down, but it's getting to be more than you can handle. So you end up, outsourcing to people who are like
sharing with others.
Yeah, exactly. Sharing with others. So I'm still deciding if that's a direction that I want to go or if I want to keep being a one-woman show. But for sure, I hope in 5 years that I have helped other freelancers as much as other freelancers have helped me. I hope that I've found lots of ways to give back.
That's fantastic. It's kind of interesting just listening to your story and where you started and where you are now. And some of what I really liked a couple of times you said, I didn't know that I'd be good at that, or wow, I am good at that.
Yeah.
How often are we pigeonholed into you're doing a job for something and that's your job description. And there's not an opportunity to do something else within the company without changing jobs. And I think
Gosh.
miss
Yes.
opportunity to grow.
Yes. And, I became really aware of that actually after I transitioned from journalism into working for a university, because I worked for a small university where there was a lot of, it was a small university that didn't have the budget for a huge staff. And so everyone on staff ended up holding a lot of responsibility. And I realized that, like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting and fascinating to be in an environment where if I want to do something additional or want to try something out, people are like, oh, okay, we need help with that. So that's something that you can't find at a lot of workplaces, though. I mean, that was kind of the particulars of the company that I worked for, and the fact that I was in a creative role in a school that had other creative departments, and like other jobs that I had. And even when I was teaching, it was like, I'm doing one thing. So for most of my life, hadn't really had the opportunity to explore, and ended up exploring, like, for instance, the software venue as a freelancer, just because by chance, somebody else I know who owns her own business needed some writing help with that type of client. And I was doing it like just for money. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm really good. Maybe I'll keep doing this type of work just because it's interesting, like, never saw myself writing about software, but here we are.
It gives us I noticed it too, going from, the employee to the business owner, or how much I've changed or my business has changed, or it gives the permission to evolve. And it'll be interesting to see, what the next few years looks like, and what kind of things that you might be writing about that you would never envision that would be something that would be a subject matter that would really resonate with you.
Yeah. You really never know what's around the next corner. You really don't.
Wow, it's been so wonderful talking with you. Is there anything else did we cover everything? I think we could probably do this forever. Anything you'd like to add?
Not really, other than that, my best piece of advice to people who are kind of wanting to strike out on their own is that networking is everything, and LinkedIn, like, should be your new home. And like, search for groups of people that share, like, people who are further along in your desired career track. Like, find those groups of people and learn from them, because that's
further along. That's interesting. I never really thought about that.
Oh yeah. 99% of what I have been able to figure out how to do successfully has been because I was part of groups of freelancers that have been doing this longer than I have.
Did you ever, that's a brave move. Did you think about that? For me, I think it would be so being new, right? As a new freelancer, putting your hand up in a group of people that are experienced, that takes a lot of guts.
So you have to find the right group, because I happen to find a group that is really about, like, helping other people, really about collaboration, and they're happy to see new people. Yeah, if I hadn't been able to find a group that already had that sort of mindset in place, that would have just been, just a lot of grit. I mean, sometimes you have to do things that are uncomfortable too. But yeah, that ended up working out really well for me.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for that. And so how would people get in touch with you? We'll put some contact information in the show notes too, but how do we find you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, Rachel Heston-Davis, and I am at rachelhestondavis.com. And I believe you're going to have you're probably going to put my email contact in, right? I mean, I check my email all the time, so that's one of the best ways to get a hold of me, honestly.
Yeah, we'll definitely put your email in the show notes as well as your website and LinkedIn profile. And is there any last thought that you'd like to leave everybody with? I didn't prep you for that one.
No, that's okay. Yeah, just I hope that I can help somebody else think through what they need to think about before they do this, because it's a really great move if you can, chase what you're good at and be self-employed. It's really great.
Great. Thanks so much for your time today, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to be here.
Mm-hmm.